Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new PennyWise podcast from Lee Enterprises. I'm your host, Terry Barn. Happy to have you here with us today. Now, if you are taking your kids off to college, I wonder if there's one thing you may have not thought about. And that is why we have joining us today, Jason Metz. Now, Jason is an insurance analyst with Forbes Advisor. Jason, thanks for being here. And I think I just gave away what our topic is today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So you are a parent and you're taking your kids to college. Do you think insurance needs to be on parents' minds at this time?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, just to clarify, I'm not a parent, I'm just an insurance analyst.
Gotcha.
And I certainly don't have any kids in college, but it is a hectic time, which I remember from my time going to college. And one of the things we talk about in insurance is just preparing for the unexpected. And for a lot of parents, I think this might be their first time. They might have a child out of the house. It might be their child's first apartment. It might be their first time for their child taking a car away from home. So there's a lot of things going on while you're still trying to managing, like the main focus of getting your kid in school and hoping that they're safe and everything. So I think there's a few different insurance aspects that we can look at that can help take a lot off your parents' plate and kind of give them more of a peace of mind, and also make sure they have the right insurance in place in case something does happen.
That sounds terrific. I know it kind of boils down to when the kids are out of the house at college or whatever the case may be, just the idea of them getting into an accident or maybe having things stolen or making poor decisions. No one in college does that, but I think let's start with some of the ideas you do have for parents to sort of check into. And I think one of the tops of the list of insurance is car insurance. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, so if you have a teenager or a college student that was living at home with you and has access to your car or has a car of their own, you want to take a few things into account. If they don't have a car of their own, but they drive your car, and they're not going to school with a car, then there are some adjustments that you may be able to make to your insurance to help things make maybe things a little more affordable. But you don't want to take your kid off the policy. And that's because when your kid comes home, if they drive the car again and get into an accident, you could be without coverage. But here are some adjustments that you can ask for. You can call your insurance company and ask for what's called a student away at school discount, which typically applies if your kid is more than 100 miles away from school and not taking the car with them. And that will give you a little bit of a price break, and then they can drive the car when they come home.
Oh, so it covers all of that. Okay.
Yeah. And if your student is performing well at school, most insurance companies give a good student discount, which gives you a little bit of discount if your student maintains a B average and some other, academic requirements. If your kid is taking the car with them to college, then you want to call your insurance company and have them update the garaging address. The garaging address, one way to think of that is, where does the car sleep at night? So for example, if you live in a suburban area where I live in Massachusetts and your student was going to Boston University, Boston is more expensive to insure than a suburb, right? Because Boston, you're more likely to get into an accident, more likely to have your car stolen, vandalized, etc., which means there's higher rates. So your insurance company needs to charge the appropriate amount of premium. If you don't update your insurance company that your student moved and took the car to Boston with them, for example, that could result in a denial of coverage if you're getting into an accident, the car gets stolen. So there's a few auto insurance things to be aware of.
Okay. Thinking about this being maybe one of the top insurance things to consider, is there a time frame on something like this? Say the parents are with their kids heading to school this weekend or something and didn't think about insurance. Is that going to matter?
I mean, typically you can do these things pretty fast. I mean, in some cases you might be able to update it online. But I would suggest giving the insurance agent a call and just saying, hey, my student left Thursday to go to Boston University. They're bringing the car with them. We need to update. And that's, I don't want to minimize it, typically a few keystrokes on their end. That's something they can do pretty quickly.
Okay. And even if the kid has already left, you can still do that. There isn't, they left the house, so too bad.
Yeah. I mean, the sooner the better.
Okay.
But, I think it's pretty reasonable to call and just update your insurance agent and say, hey, here's what's going on.
Yeah, so much going on that I can see how something like this can slip through the cracks. So give the insurance guy at your place a call. That's a good one.
Yeah,
What
and you definitely, obviously, you want to do it before an incident happens.
oh,
But I think insurance companies are generally pretty understanding. And if you're just moving to a new city or new location, if you give them a
yeah.
call as soon as you get a chance and say, hey, my student's out here. Now, if we're talking in April, you haven't called your insurance company and an incident happens and your kids had that since September, that could be a different conversation. So I
Right.
would not recommend waiting too long. Do this as soon as you can.
Okay, good reminder for right now.
Yeah.
Here's another one that I think is so interesting because I can easily see how people would forget this, and you probably don't want to. Renter's insurance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of your students or your child's personal belongings, generally they're protected under your homeowner's insurance. Like, when your kid lives under your own roof, if their laptop gets stolen at a coffee house, then your laptop would be covered under your homeowner's insurance. And that follows them to a dormitory. So if your student is in a dorm, generally they're covered under the homeowner's insurance, but it doesn't follow them to an off-campus apartment. So if, say, you have a junior or a senior in college and they have their first apartment, your homeowner's insurance most likely is not going to cover their personal items. In that case, it's a good idea to think about renter's insurance. And that covers all your personal belongings, like your bicycle, your laptop, your phone, or some liability insurance that is also involved with renters in case somebody gets hurt while visiting their apartment. Also additional living expenses if, say, a fire was set off in a nearby apartment and sprinklers ruined everything and you couldn't live in a home for a couple of days, it would help pay for a hotel bill. So renter's insurance is really important for a student who lives off campus.
And again, I got to ask you about the time frame. It sounds like this one needs to be done pretty quickly when the kid gets to college.
Yeah, renter's insurance, you want to get that set up
Yeah.
theoretically before you move in or get that in place. But the good news here too is renter's insurance they're pretty standard policies.
Okay.
And some renter's insurance companies advertise getting quotes in minutes and getting a policy that day. So you may theoretically be able to get it done in less than an afternoon. But again, this is something I wouldn't wait on. One other thing I'd like to add in terms of renter's insurance and your personal belongings is doing what's called a home inventory. And that gives you a good idea of how much coverage you're going to need. So when you sign up for a renter's insurance policy, you might get a choice of just throwing arbitrary numbers out, like $10,000 worth of personal contents coverage, up to 20, 25. Don't know how much your student's going to bring with them to college, but a good way to know and not underestimate what you have is to take an inventory of what you're bringing with you. Whether that might be computer equipment, if you're bringing your instruments with you, your clothing, all those things that add up and kind of fall under the umbrella of your personal contents. You could just do that, a simple list of writing that down. You could film it with your iPhone camera.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yes.
That's a really good, quick way, because I know it's really hectic, like in those final days of leading up to leaving.
Yeah.
But that'll also help you if something does happen. Let's say a worst case scenario is your student's apartment's ruined in a fire and they lose everything. Having a home inventory is that good way to show your insurance company what you have, what it's worth, and that makes the insurance process go so much faster.
Oh, I bet. I can't imagine having to, after a situation like that, go back and try to remember what you brought with you. That it's so stressful anyway, that that is an awesome tip, to make a list. Or I love that you said take a video of what you're taking with you. That's
the quickest way to do it. I mean, and home inventory is good for anybody that has any kind of home or renter's insurance, not just college students. I mean, that goes for myself too. Like, I forget about all the things that I have in my house.
Right.
And if something did happen, the idea of such a stressful situation of trying to remember everything that you had and need to do, you're going to forget stuff. So the home inventory is that way to, like, hey, here's what was lost. Here, if applicable, the serial number, the estimated value. It'll make the whole process go so much smoother.
Oh, and easier to do it that way. So thank you, Jason, for that. Yeah. Oh my gosh. What about, and this is something new to me at least, the idea of tuition insurance. What is this?
Yeah, some companies offer what's called tuition insurance. And basically it's a policy that covers or reimburses you a portion of tuition if your child has to leave school for certain reasons, such as
Mm.
a health issue or mental health, or in some cases, substance abuse. So it's a way for some parents to be able to get a little bit more protection just in case something happens. It's worth looking into.
Okay. And you mentioned health. Why don't I ask about health insurance? How is the
Yeah.
coverage these days with parents and the kids?
So under the Affordable Health Care Act,
Mhm.
I believe dependents under the age of 26 can still be covered under the parent's policy. So that could be your first option as a parent.
Okay.
But then, of course, there becomes like those kind of tricky scenarios where if your student goes away to a different area, you could have out of network coverage, right? Which might
Yes. Yeah.
not have coverage or might have more expensive coverage. So in that case, you might want to look at some other options, such as the student health plan. It might be worth looking into getting their own health insurance plan from the marketplace.
Yeah.
Some students might qualify for Medicare or Medicaid, depending on finances, but usually that means they have to stay in state. But those are a few options you have. So I would say your own health insurance, a marketplace plan, or a student health plan are good places to look.
Okay. I don't know if this is the case, but I do remember, oh boy, long time ago when I went to college, the very basics, say you had a cold or a headache or something like that, there was a student health care center and you could get a little bit of medical care there, but probably not like the kinds of things that you're talking about when we talk about actual health insurance.
Yeah, I recall the same. Like I remember getting
Mhm.
Sudafed for a cold
Yeah.
from like, essentially like a school nurse,
Right,
for
right.
lack of
Yeah.
better terms. But yeah, you definitely want health insurance in place for something more serious, whether you sprain your ankle playing basketball or you catch a nasty flu or COVID. There's a lot
Yeah.
of things to worry about, obviously. So you want to make sure health insurance is in place.
Oh, these are such good things to think about. There's one more on the list that I think I want to ask you about with regards to traveling and the idea, again, of having travel insurance. Is this
Yeah.
something you think students need when they go to college?
Generally, no. I mean, this would be
Okay.
very narrow. You know, when you go to college, you're technically not traveling, you're moving and living in an area.
Right.
But and this is kind of a little bit more far out there example, but let's say your student got accepted to the University of Hawaii and you're going to take advantage of that and move your student to college, but also kind of build a vacation around that, where now you have some prepaid expenses, you have connecting flights and all that. In situations like that, you might want to look at travel insurance, but again, that's
Okay.
very narrow. If you're driving your kid to state college 3 hours away, you don't need travel insurance. But if you have some non-refundable trip expenses,
Yeah.
that might be worth looking into. But again, typically for just moving a student into college, you wouldn't need it. And for the student, if they're driving themselves to college, you certainly wouldn't need it.
Okay.
But that is one thing to be aware of if you're kind of like making a trip out of the college experience.
Okay. So I guess the top ones to think about really do start with car insurance, renter's insurance. And then we talked, briefly about the ideas of tuition, health, and travel insurance. Does that pretty much cover the list of what parents and kids should be thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, I would say health insurance first and foremost, because obviously it's their health. The car insurance, so that way you don't run into any problems, because obviously if you don't have the insurance in the right place, written correctly, that could run into some serious coverage problems if something happens. And then the renter's insurance to help protect your student from problems like theft, fire, smoke damage, all those kind of things that can happen. That would give parents a little bit of extra peace of mind in like an already hectic situation.
No kidding. Jason, anything else that, as we're talking about a hectic situation, that
Right.
parents can just sort of think about that could help their kids?
Just have a conversation with them. I say this as a non-parent, but just as common sense things about staying safe on campus, just about
Oh, that's great.
some basic stuff, making sure you lock the door, things to prevent accidents so you don't have to go through insurance hassles. Insurance is there if you need it. You don't want to use it if you don't have to, right?
Yes.
Locking the doors, being careful at nighttime, all those kind of little safety tips also feeds into insurance as well.
It does. Jason, anything we've missed?
I think we're pretty thorough. I think we got
I
the
think
major
so.
insurance
Yeah.
and like the little sub ones
Yep.
pretty well handled, but
And we don't mean to obviously frighten parents. This is all meant to be helpful and to hopefully be something you need. But hopefully, as Jason said, I love this, something you don't have to ever use. And I think we sort of live by that as adults too with our own insurance.
yeah, and yeah, I don't want to frighten anybody. I mean,
No.
when I say things like fire, it sounds worse than it probably most likely not going to happen. But
Right.
to know that you have the ability to get your kid back up and running, get all the things they need without having to pay too many out-of-pocket expenses,
Yeah,
is a good peace of mind.
I love it. Jason Metz, the insurance analyst with Forbes Advisor. Always terrific information, Jason. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on.
Yes, I'm Terry Barr, host of PennyWise podcast from Lee Enterprises. And if you ever want to listen to any of our other podcasts, they are all wherever you find your podcasts. That could be Spotify, Google, Yahoo, any of those. You can find our podcasts. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week. Thanks again, Jason.
Thank you.